let's talk about client on-sites. In this video, I'll be covering a comprehensive guide for you to be able to plan your first client on-site visit. Without further ado, let's get into it. I'm currently in the process of planning an on-site trip for one of my clients and thought it may be a helpful video to make about the things that I tend to think about when making this trip. I've linked all information and the resources in a link in the description of the video, so definitely check that out. With that being said, why travel on-site? What is the benefit? There are three main reasons as to why you might consider going on a client on-site visit. The first of which is to further develop that business relationship. These days, companies are located all around the world, and most communication is done either through email, through virtual meetings, or through just the phone. Oftentimes, with technology these days, we've forgotten the value of face-to-face communication, and that still can be a very big one. The second of which is to observe projects and processes in real time. During client on-site visits, a big part of it is to not only further that relationship with your clients, but also to observe and to see where you can offer more value. And number three, just getting more time with folks. From my experience, the higher up your clients are in that corporate ladder, the more difficult it is to grab time on their calendars. When you organize and plan a client on-site visit, it ensures that these high key stakeholders are going to be present during your discussions, and it makes them prioritize your meetings as well, because being in person, it just means that much more. Now that we've gone over why you should visit a client on site, let's go over the common types of client on-site visits. There are three main ones. I'll group them by the following three categories. We have the initiation and sales visit, we have the project status and recurring visits, and then we also have the monitoring and optimization visit. So typically this happens post-live. In the initiation and sales visit, these are typically owned by your sales counterpart. Generally, they're either trying to get a contract signed or to finalize any contracting details. The whole purpose and premise of this is to get your clients excited about the partnership and to make sure that they finalize all those details. Being on site earlier on can help expedite that relationship and trust that you're hoping to grow with your client. The second of which are recurring visits. For example, if you're halfway through a project and you're currently in the training or testing phases, you'll oftentimes have these types of recurring visits on site to make sure that your key stakeholders and users are being trained and they're being taught effectively. The benefit of these types of visits are you get consistent time with your end users and with your key stakeholders. Typically easier to solve problems that way. And the third of which are post-live visits or visits during the monitoring phase of a project. These typically occur once the project has been fully executed and you're making sure that everything is functioning as expected and looking at any opportunities for expansions. The key benefit here is you get to see everything in action in real time. So all the efforts that your teams have put in to get through the execution phase, you're now able to witness in real time and get feedback as well. Now that we've covered over the benefits of why to do a client on-site visit and some common examples of those, let's work together to plan your first client on-site visit. Come on. Okay, so for step one, you want to plant that seed early on. Depending on your organization's structure, on-site visits may be a very standard practice. Start with planting the seed, with meeting with the directors, the executive sponsors, really who the key project stakeholders are that you're talking to on the client end. Early on, offer the opportunity for a client on-site visit and give them reasons why this has been beneficial and part of your standard practice. After that initial introduction, during my weekly status calls with my clients, I typically like to put a reminder in that a client on-site will be occurring sometime during the project. When planting the seed, it's really important that you get your teams excited. Hopefully at this point, especially if you're doing a post-live on-site visit, you've already developed that relationship with your clients and they're excited to meet you in person. Okay, step two, get the dates. Now that your teams know that an on-site visit's happening, it's time you start finalizing those dates with your executive sponsors. During your meetings with your clients, they should already know that an on-site visit is happening. Formalize the request by sending out a short and concise email. Here's an example of some information that I would include. Provide some information on the type of client on-site visit, a general overview as to what the goals are for the visit, some details on who the key stakeholders are and who you plan to meet with, and last but not least, some proposed dates that work for your teams. During the request, it's very important that you always offer flexibility. The higher up your client executive sponsor is, the more likely it's hard to grab time on their calendars. If you don't receive an initial response, give it some time and then consider sending a follow-up email, following up via phone, or just checking in during one of your calls. Step number 3, finalize the agenda. Once you've got the dates booked on the calendars, it's time to start finalizing that agenda with your clients. Communicate with any stakeholders who you plan to visit while on site, and make sure that they all know the dates and the times in which you plan to meet. Prepare your internal teams. If you're not traveling solo, make sure that you give them the benefit of the doubt and provide them the details about the trip as well. Throughout this process, you'll want to create a mock agenda with the goals that you hope to reach by the end of the trip. That agenda should include any scheduled meetings with stakeholders, any times and dates in which you plan to visit specific facilities or operation centers, and ensure that the right counterparts are listed down so that they can be held accountable when you visit. Throughout this process, you want this to be a collaborative effort. Encourage your clients to highlight any additional opportunities where you may be able to provide value as well. Step number 4, travel logistics. Depending on your organization structure, you may be the lucky one in charge of planning for the entire team's on-site visit. If that's the case, while it can be overwhelming, it's honestly a great experience as an event planner, and it'll make you more comfortable when you start planning your own personal trips as well. A couple of things that I always like to keep in mind for these client on-site trips. Identify the best airports for the on-site location, coordinate travel times, and try to be considerate for any team members who live in different time zones. For client on-site visits, typically you'll want to fly in the day before your visit on-site, so you'll have time to acclimate to the new environment. Depending on your organization, you may be requested to fly back directly after that last meeting on the on-site day. Confirm the flight details, book your ticket, and send those details on to your other team members. Identify your housing for the trip. It's very common for you and your teams to be staying in hotels, so you'll want to make sure you find the best rates and the best locations for your hotels. Determine if rental cars are necessary. This is generally dependent on the number of sites that you're visiting and the distance between the hotel and the site that you're going to. Try to use your best judgment when thinking about if a rental might be more cost efficient versus an Uber, Lyft, or taxi. Reserve any collaborative spaces for your teams to huddle during the on-site. This is one that's often overlooked just because it's not as essential as some of the other things I've just mentioned, but it can be a huge game changer. It can make the entire experience more organized. Plan with your executive sponsor if there's an office or a collaborative space that your team can just post up on. It makes it easy for your teams to know where to go, and it makes it easy for the client's stakeholders to know how to find you. Reserve any restaurants. This is one of my favorite ones, and trust me, your clients and your internal teams will love you for this. Restaurants and eating meals together, that's a great way to bond with your clients in a more casual setting. Last but not least, prepare any resources or any items that you like to give out while you're on site. Print out any tip sheets, any one-pagers, any agendas. Prepare to bring or to have any merch or items that you like to distribute, either sent over to you or sent over to the on-site location. Okay, last but not least, step 5. Communicate, communicate, communicate. Communication is the number one thing that needs to happen in order to ensure the on-site goes smoothly. Things happen, life happens. You never know who on your trip's going to be sick. You never know if there are conflicts and folks aren't able to make that on-site meeting. In the case if your plane gets delayed and it gets canceled. In the case if the rooms that you had initially booked are no longer available. How are you going to take those challenges and roadblocks and run with it? With the communication piece, it's really important that you stay flexible and you try to control the things that you can. Throughout that process, if there are any changes, just make sure that you're transparent with your internal and your client teams as well. People are much more understanding when they have transparency into what you're going through and what your plan is in order to move forward. Whether it's your first client on-site visit or you just need a reminder on the things to think about, I hope you found these tips helpful in helping you plan your next client on-site trip. As a follow-up to this video, I'll be creating a guide in another video on what and how to pack for your next client on-site trip. As always, thanks for watching the video. Drop a like, subscribe, and we'll catch you all in the next video.